Suit yourself, Zoe teased. But go rub it in those girls' faces. You've got your rightful place as his best friend, and they've got nothing on that. Thanks, sweetheart, Deli said, a little more comforted by her friend's words. Remember, Zoe said just before hanging up, you only live once. Enjoy yourself, and remember, don't hold back. Do what I would do. Deli laughed, shaking her head as she ended the call. The next morning, Deli woke up earlier than usual, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Her conversation with Zoe had put things in perspective, and she was eager to get back to work. She sang her way through a shower, feeling a rare sense of optimism as she got dressed. After pulling on a cute white dress with a leafy green pattern, she admired her reflection in the mirror. The dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and she felt confident and ready to tackle whatever the day brought. As she tiptoed out of her room, she saw Ashton still asleep on the couch, his tousled hair and relaxed posture somehow making him look even more handsome. She paused for a moment, feeling the familiar stir of longing in her chest. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. Heading to the kitchen, she prepared a batch of muffins, her favorite recipe, with bananas mixed in because she knew Ashton loved them. She set the muffins to bake and quickly scribbled a note for him. Her playful Star Wars reference made her smile as she finished. Hey, nerf herder. Have an awesome day. Don't give your employees too much BS. Oh, and don't mess up that new business deal. Delete. With the note ready, she placed it next to the coffee maker, then moved back to the living room. She couldn't help herself from admiring Ashton for a moment longer. Carefully, she draped a blanket over him, and, on impulse, pressed a soft kiss to his stubbled cheek. Her heart raced, but just as quickly, he groaned and rolled over, pulling the blanket over his head. Dealey chuckled softly, shaking her head. She had no idea what she was thinking. This whole situation was more complicated than she cared to admit. As she slipped out the door, she couldn't help but laugh again, remembering Zoe's outrageous advice. At least she hadn't taken it too far. This time, Deli couldn't help but grin as she reread the note she had written for Ashton that morning. It was just a silly little message, something to make him laugh, even though he'd probably roll his eyes. After all, he'd always thought her little notes were goofy, but that was part of the fun. She knew he wasn't the type to ever send a handwritten letter, but that didn't stop her from continuing the tradition. She was stubborn like that. Hey, nerf herder, she had written, feeling a little playful. The Star Wars reference was, of course, just to see if he'd catch it. He probably would, and knowing him, he'd probably tease her about it later. She had to admit, she was already picturing him rolling his eyes with that smile of his. Have an awesome day, she added, making sure to include a little wink, even though no one would ever see it. Don't give your employees too much BS. Oh, and don't mess up that new business deal. Deli. She had fun with it, even if it was a bit silly. She couldn't resist adding her touch to his day in her own way. Once she finished, she set the note down next to the coffee maker, before turning her attention to the muffins she had just pulled from the oven. The smell of fresh baked goods filled the kitchen, and she couldn't wait for Ashton to enjoy them. She knew he'd appreciate the effort, even if it was a little out of character for him to show it. After placing the muffins on the cooling rack, she started making sure everything was in order. As she moved about the kitchen, she heard the soft sound of snoring from the living room. She couldn't help but smile as she pictured Ashton sprawled out on the couch, still fast asleep after a late night of work. She tried not to be too loud as she approached the couch, trying not to wake him. He looked so peaceful, so relaxed, and she found herself pausing for a moment, just watching him. She knew she shouldn't linger after all, they were just friends. But the way he looked, even with his messy hair and the way he had a little stubble on his chin, made her wish for something more. But she couldn't have that. He was her best friend. There were lines that couldn't be crossed, no matter how many times her heart betrayed her. Still, she found herself leaning over him, brushing a lock of hair away from his face. He looked so serene, his face soft in sleep. The urge to do something impulsive crossed her mind. She thought about what Zoe had said the night before about showing him how she felt. She had suggested she kiss him, or at least do something daring. But she couldn't do that. Could she? The idea of pressing her lips to his cheek was almost too tempting. She told herself it was just a small gesture, nothing too forward. After all, what harm could it do? So, with a deep breath, she leaned down and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. As soon as her lips touched his skin, she felt a jolt of warmth spread through her. It was so brief, so light, but it left a lingering sensation. She quickly pulled away, a flush creeping up her neck. She couldn't believe she'd just done that. But before she could collect herself, Ashton's eyes snapped open. He stared at her, his gaze sharp, and she froze. Her heart was racing, and she didn't know how to explain what had just happened. He groaned softly, his face scrunching up in discomfort, before he rolled over, pulling the blanket over his head. A few moments later, she heard the steady rhythm of his breathing, the telltale sound of him falling back into a deep sleep. She exhaled slowly, her heart still pounding in her chest. What had she been thinking? She quickly straightened up and backed away, trying not to wake him further. She felt like a total fool. What had she expected? That he'd jump up and declare his feelings for her? No. That was ridiculous. She was just being silly. Shaking off the embarrassment, she turned to leave the living room. At least she hadn't acted on the other suggestion Zoe had made. The thought of it made her laugh, even though she was still trying to get the image out of her head. She didn't think Ashton would ever see her the same way again if she'd gone through with it. She snorted softly, rolling her eyes at herself. Maybe she was a little too wrapped up in fantasies. The next morning, Dealey woke up feeling surprisingly good. It was early, and she was still adjusting to the routine of living with Ashton. It felt strange, but not in a bad way. She was glad to be back in the lab, even if the hours were long, and she had to deal with the occasional lingering thought of what had happened between them. It wasn't anything serious, just a little awkwardness that she couldn't shake. The shower felt refreshing as she sang along to her favorite tunes, letting the water wash away the remnants of the night's silly thought. She spent a little extra time on her hair and makeup, something she hadn't done in a while. There was something about being forced to rebuild her wardrobe after the fire that made her appreciate the little things. She'd gotten better at picking out clothes that made her feel confident, and today was no exception. She slipped into a simple but cute white dress with a green leafy pattern. It hugged her curves just right, accentuating the parts she liked best while still feeling comfortable. She admired herself in the mirror for a moment, thinking she looked pretty damn good. She had a few more new dresses hanging in the closet, waiting for the right occasion. What that occasion would be, she didn't know yet. But today felt like a day full of potential. She crept out of her room, careful not to wake Ashton. He was still on the couch, and she could see him curled up under a blanket. It was strange to think about how different things were now. They'd been friends for so long, but now, living under the same roof, she couldn't ignore the unspoken tension between them. She made her way to the kitchen, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The plan was to make breakfast something she enjoyed doing, and something she knew Ashton would appreciate. She set to work on a batch of banana muffins, knowing they were his favorite. As the sweet smell of baked goods filled the kitchen, she pulled out some coffee to go with it. The muffins were baking, and she was writing another note for Ashton when she heard him stir in the living room. His voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, I didn't expect you to be up so early," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. She looked over and saw him rubbing his eyes, blinking at the light streaming in through the window. He was clearly not a morning person. "I was just making breakfast," she said, trying to keep things casual. "Thought I'd leave you a note. You know, to start your day off right." He chuckled, rubbing his face. "You really are something else, Deli. You're too much sometimes, but I appreciate it." She smiled, feeling her heart lighten a little. Despite the awkwardness she felt around him, it was moments like this that made it all worth it. "Don't mention it. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." She set the note down next to the coffee maker, trying to ignore the fluttering in her stomach as she turned back to the muffins. She was probably overthinking things, but she couldn't help it. Being around Ashton all the time was starting to make her question things she had never questioned before. Maybe Zoe had a point. Maybe she was just afraid to admit it to herself. The day went on like any other, but she couldn't stop thinking about the strange bond that had developed between them. It wasn't romantic, at least not yet. But it was something, and she didn't know how to navigate it. Later, after work, she found herself lost in thought as she made her way home. She wasn't ready for another round of awkwardness with Ashton, but the message he'd sent earlier that day asking her to join him for drinks had thrown her off. It was a simple offer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it meant more than just casual hanging out. Still, she shoved the thought aside and focused on the day ahead. One thing was for sure, things were definitely more complicated now. Lainey stepped out of the taxi and into the quiet apartment, the stillness of the space greeting her as she walked inside. A few lights were on, casting a soft glow in the otherwise dim room, indicating that Ashton had likely rushed out to the new bar he had been talking about. Sighing, she thought to herself that a quiet night alone with the TV was just what she needed. She dropped her purse and keys onto the table by the door and immediately turned toward the liquor cabinet. She had bought a bottle of red wine earlier, and the idea of a relaxing evening with a glass in hand sounded perfect. Pulling the cork out, she was about to pour herself a glass when a voice startled her. "Long day?" Lainey nearly jumped out of her skin, spilling wine down the front of her dress. "Damn it," Why are you sneaking up on me like that, Ashton? I thought you'd left, she exclaimed, turning to face him. Oh, shit, he muttered as he walked over to her, concern immediately on his face. I thought I was being funny dramatic. Not like scary dramatic. I love this dress, Lainey grumbled, frowning at the stain, now ruining it. Now look at it. I'm sorry. Ashton reached for the front of her dress, inspecting the deep red stain. It was a joke, he said, his voice sincere, but also laced with guilt. Her expression softened, but she couldn't shake her frustration. I'm not taking my dress off here in the middle of the kitchen just because you made a mistake. I'm going to change and then hand it to you. Do you have a secret stain remover or something? Ashton chuckled. I didn't mean right here. I thought you'd be fine with it. I've seen you in a bathing suit before. It's no big deal. That's different, Lainey muttered as she retreated to her bedroom, a mixture of irritation and embarrassment rising in her chest. She returned moments later, now in a baggy shirt and shorts, the ruined dress in hand. How's it different? Ashton asked, his tone genuinely curious. Lainey handed him the dress without offering an explanation. She didn't feel like going into the fact that undressing in front of him felt like a step towards something that, in her mind, could never happen. Maybe I wasn't wearing any underwear, she added unexpectedly, surprising even herself. Ashton's eyes glinted with mischief. Oh, is that so? I guess I'll never find out. He grabbed the dress and then the bottle of dishwashing liquid, his voice casual as he asked, Could you grab the hydrogen peroxide from under the bathroom sink? Lainey watched as he mixed the concoction and carefully blotted it onto the stain. There. Now we just let it sit for about an hour. Your stain will be gone after we wash it. Thanks, she said, appreciating his effort despite herself. I didn't realize you were such a laundry expert. My granny taught me, he replied with a shrug, as if it were no big deal. Lainey smiled despite her best attempts to stay irritated. The image of Ashton as a child, learning something so domestic from his grandmother, hit her with a wave of affection she wasn't prepared for. So, what are you doing here anyway? She asked, needing a distraction. I thought you were off to that bar you texted me about. Ashton smirked at her, clearly pleased she had noticed. So, you did see it? He teased. Yeah, so, she shrugged. I just didn't feel like going out. I wanted a quiet night in. Didn't feel like going out, or didn't feel like going out with me. His voice was suddenly serious, no longer teasing. Her heart skipped a beat, and a heat rushed to her cheeks. Why does it matter? He poured himself a glass of her wine and sat across from her, his eyes fixed on hers. Because I wanted to go with you, he said simply. Lainey's mind scrambled to understand what he meant. With me? She echoed, confused. Yes, Ashton replied, his voice gentle but firm. Dilly, we need to talk. Her stomach twisted at the seriousness in his tone. About what? She asked, feeling a lump form in her throat. Sit down, he commanded, his tone softer but more insistent than she was used to hearing from him. She did as he asked, her pulse racing. She had never heard Ashton sound so serious. There was something about him in this moment, no teasing, no playful jabs, just pure sincerity, and it made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something huge. Look, Ashton began, his voice calm. I know I've asked you to hang out a lot and you've blown me off every time. It's been worse since you moved in here. I feel like I see you less now than before. I'm not sure what's going on with you, but it's got me worried. Lainey swallowed hard. She hated confrontation and even more, she hated secrets. She knew she couldn't avoid talking about it any longer. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to look him in the eye. I've been busy, she said, her voice wavering slightly. Busy? You've been avoiding me. That's not busy. Ashton's voice held no anger, just a quiet frustration. I don't know what's going on, but I can tell something's off. Lainey's mind raced for a way to escape this conversation, but she knew she couldn't keep lying to him. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ashton leaned forward, his eyes still locked on hers. What are you doing right now? You're home, you opened a bottle of wine, and yet you don't want to hang out with me? His voice softened. I just want to spend time with you. We used to hang out all the time. You used to want to be around me. I'm tired, Lainey lied. It's been a long day. I want to relax. Ashton raised an eyebrow. I get that. But something tells me you wouldn't be hiding in your room if I was out like you thought I was. What's really going on, Deli? Lainey felt cornered, but the words that came out next surprised even her. I saw your girl from Saturday night. She was in the kitchen, wearing only your shirt. And it made me uncomfortable. she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. Ashton's face softened. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would bother you. Lainey looked away, feeling a knot in her stomach. She made me uncomfortable. It's just, I'm not okay with seeing you with other women like that. Ashton's eyes widened slightly, and he nodded, his expression growing serious. I get it. And I'm sorry. I won't let that happen again. From now on, I'll be more discreet. No more women in the kitchen, in nothing but my shirt. Lainey couldn't help but laugh at his attempt to ease the tension, though it felt hollow. She knew this didn't fix anything. I just miss spending time with you. Just us, Ashton added, his voice sincere. Like we used to. Her heart skipped. I want that too, she whispered. Then let's do something fun. You used to love hanging out with me. Remember when we went to Coney Island? That was one of the best days of my life. He paused, his eyes full of a kind of yearning she hadn't expected. I want that again. Lainey felt the walls she had so carefully built around her heart begin to crack. She wanted it too. But could she ever stop pretending? Could she push aside the feelings she had for him that ran deeper than just friendship? Fine, she said, her voice barely audible. We'll hang out tomorrow. You win. Ashton grinned, and for a moment Lainey felt the weight of his happiness. Tomorrow, all day. You're mine, he said with a wink before heading toward the door. Before he left, he turned to give her a quick hug. Lainey froze as his arms enveloped her. His body felt impossibly close, and her mind was flooded with the feel of him strong, comforting, and completely out of reach. She pulled away quickly, her heart racing. I'll see you tomorrow, he said softly, before walking out. Lainey stood there, heart thumping in her chest. Tomorrow. What had she gotten herself into? ASHTON 12, YEARSEARLIER. There was only one reason Ashton ever considered getting out of bed a half hour early on school days. It wasn't sports or anything academic, it was Amber Collins. Amber was the girl every guy in school dreamed about. She had blonde hair, full pink lips, and a body that seemed designed to make every guy stop and stare. But, as luck would have it, she wanted Ashton. So, every morning, Ashton made sure to get to school early, hoping to meet her before anyone else showed up. They'd sneak away to the side of the building, where, if things went well, they might be able to get a little more personal. It was a game he was always happy to play. After his shower, a few spritzes of cologne, and a quick comb through his hair, Ashton grabbed his duffel bag and headed to school. When he got there, he spotted Amber chatting with her friends outside the building, but he knew it was all a ploy to stall, waiting for him to show up. But as he stepped off the bottom step, ready to walk toward her, the speakers overhead crackled to life with an announcement. His stomach sank as the principal's voice came through, calling him to the office. The disappointment on both his and Amber's faces was immediate. I'll find you after? He said, trying to sound casual as he passed by her. Sure, she shrugged, but her tone was less enthusiastic than usual. As he walked inside, he could hear her and her friends giggling behind him. Ashton tried not to dwell on it. He had bigger things to deal with, namely the mystery of his impending meeting with Mrs. Dupree. Mr. Patterson's, thank you for joining us. Mrs. Dupree's voice greeted him in her small, cramped office. Ashton nodded politely and scanned the room, immediately spotting a girl sitting across from Mrs. Dupree. She was, well, plain. Long brown curly hair pulled back into a ponytail, big glasses hiding most of her face, and an oversized gray shirt that seemed to do nothing for her. At first glance, she didn't seem like someone worth noticing. But, Ashton thought, he had to focus on the task at hand. Amber was waiting for him. This is Delilah Stevens, Mrs. Dupree continued. As you know, we have a mentorship program for new students, and as an upperclassman, I'm assigning her to you. Ashton blinked, trying to process what was happening. Mentoring a new student? He'd done it before, but this time felt different. The word assigning made it seem like he had more responsibility than he was ready to handle. Amber Collins was his priority right now, not babysitting some shy girl. See to it that she knows her way around the school, Mrs. Dupree instructed. Introduce her to your classmates. You know the drill. Ashton's gaze fell on Delilah again. She looked up at him shyly, pushing her glasses back up her nose and clutching a stack of books to her chest. She was nervous, he could tell, but she still managed a timid smile. He sighed inwardly. The last thing he needed right now was this girl as a distraction. Actually, Mrs. Dupree, Ashton started, trying to sound convincing. This is a really busy time of year with football practice and all. And last I heard, you plan on working for your father's real estate company after college, Mrs. Dupree interrupted with a raised eyebrow. Not trying to make a career out of football, are you? You can handle this minor distraction. Besides, Delilah has a long list of her own extracurricular activities that won't conflict with your schedule. Unless, of course, there's something else you need to be doing. Amber Collins, Ashton thought. Specifically, getting closer to Amber. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. He wasn't about to risk his reputation by being seen with this girl, but it seemed like Mrs. Dupree wasn't going to let him off the hook. No, of course not, he muttered, slumping into the chair. No problem. Delilah smiled again, more genuinely this time, and quickly stood to leave, following him as he headed out of the office. Ashton tried to stay polite, but the whole situation was quickly becoming a nuisance. He rattled off the most basic directions: cafeteria, gym, bathrooms, all the places someone had to be an idiot to get lost in. What's your first class? He asked, not really interested but feeling obliged to keep up some level of conversation. A P English, Delilah answered, sounding a little more confident. But just as quickly, she seemed to shrink back into her shell, like she was trying to hide something. A P, of course, Ashton muttered, less impressed than he wanted to be. Just then, he caught sight of Amber down the hall with her friends. He suddenly felt a strong urge to ditch Delilah. Hey, listen! Do you think you can manage by yourself for first period? I've got some stuff to take care of before class. Delilah blinked, her shoulders drooping slightly as she looked down at the floor. Okay. I guess. Ashton didn't wait to hear more. With a quick nod, he hurried toward Amber. This was what mattered right now. Amber was right there, and he wasn't going to waste another moment. By the time first period ended, Ashton had nearly forgotten all about Delilah. Amber and he were already chatting and laughing. The world felt lighter, and he could finally relax. But as he rounded the corner to his next class, everything came crashing back when he saw Delilah again, this time with a slight tear in her eye, scrambling to pick up the papers she had dropped when Amber accidentally knocked into her. Hey, watch where you're going, you fat elephant. Amber's voice cut through the hallway, sharp and cruel. Delilah bent down to retrieve her things, but the hurt was clear on her face. And when she looked up at Amber, the anger in her eyes was unmistakable. Watch where you're going, Blondie, she snapped, her voice laced with a defiance Ashton didn't expect.